Welcome back to the Cyrus King Show. This is your host, Cyrus King. And this episode, the title, The Black Man God, They're Not Like Us. So when you have a title like that, so I'm going to have half of this episode for the YouTube audience and half of the episode for the Patreon audience. When you have an episode, when you have not even an episode, a concept like this, right? It's gonna get reactions out of people, right? So if you're in the Abrahamic religions, you're gonna eventually that's gonna be like what is it? Like heresy, not heresy. Like, it's gonna be something that you're not gonna like, right? Because there's one God. But then when you get into researching things and words and definitions, God is like when you say God, como es debar, like those are just attributes from the Greek, right? Just attributes. So yeah, if you're religious, you may not like it. And then if you are a member of, I guess you might say another race, you may not like it. Then you may not like it if you're black, and because in the end of the day, see, it's a catch-22. You got the 5% of the nations of gods on earth. Like, you have people who've said this before, right? But it's a catch-22. Because for a lot of people, it's bravado. And for a lot of people, it's a reaction to being treated harshly, generationally. And it's also a reaction to, because in order to justify treating somebody a certain way, you have to kind of downplay their accomplishments, right? So it's also, continuously downplaying, let's say in this case, African or black people, right? Because the black people is bigger than the term African. If you're using it, it's a social construct, so but it's bigger, right? So if you're gonna downplay even African or black accomplishments, then you're gonna get people who, when they research it, say, shit, that bravado is what keeps them alive. So that's why I would never tell somebody don't have bravado. I don't, that's not my style, but I wouldn't tell somebody don't do it, because for some people, that's the way they kept themselves alive, or kept their culture alive, kept their way of life alive, kept their pride alive, right? So we got all that. Cool. But then you have another reaction. This is the fourth one is why making a video like this is dangerous. Because the danger is when somebody downplays your accomplishments, you then go out of control the other way, right? You go out of control the other way in terms of trying to prove your accomplishments to that people or others. And then you become what you hate. Right? And you see this all the time. Where, I'm keeping it 100, right? You get people who, don't like being too African. And Africa's beyond the place. So, I don't care if you're from Alabama, Compton, or Peru. You know what I mean? Or fucking Brixton and shit. I don't care, right? You got people who just don't like it, right? So if you see something too tribal, you see food that's not civilized by Eurocentric standards, you say, ew, that's nasty. I'm not into that. So what happens in that situation? You become the people that you're criticizing, right? And that same person who said, I don't like that food, I don't like that food. I don't like that. I don't want no dasheen. The same person will be like, they'll look at another person who's mixed and say, that person's not identifying being black. But there's all stages. You could identify being black and hate the product of your ancestors. And then to flip it, you then say, I don't believe DNA testing, that's not my ancestors. I mean, that's, so see, so even when you got people who then say, yeah, we are God, based on, there's a high God and there's degrees even, but below that, that's divine, we ain't that either. You born of flesh and blood, you die 80 years old, right? I ain't gonna say you're the ultimate level divine, right? But the reaction sucks, because then you just flip it. You can't be like, you know what? We came to America before Columbus. You can't stop at that shit. Then you gotta be like, we are the majority who's here, right, before Columbus. I'm like, whoa, slow down. Like, coming to some place is different than being the majority, right? We have to take everything extreme. And then once you take everything extreme, you give your ops the ammo to say, see, you ain't God. Because in the end of the day, that's not how somebody divine will behave. And I don't mean divine by morals. Divine is just being a G. You know? Divine is just how to conduct yourself a certain way, proving your shit by actions. Right? If you're going to say you God, then you're supposed to know, I'm going to keep it 100. The lifestyles of the niggas, of the dudes beneath you. The mortals, you're supposed to know their culture. Part of the reason why some people love the Moors was because the Moors were trained in their own culture, European culture, Islamic culture. They were freaking masters, right? Renaissance men, right? Even if you don't just say Moors, you say, there were sections of blacks in the Ottoman Empire who was running shit. I'm not saying the Ottoman Empire was majority black or the majority black people running shit, but they had sections who were running shit, right? People admire that. But when you come in and you start whining and shit, or you only know yourself in a globalized world and you don't know anybody else's stuff, that's not God. It's not. So then other people are going to come back and be like, nah, they ain't. But truth is truth. I mean, it don't matter how you want to look at it. If you look at humanity, it's 300,000 years old, maybe 3 million years old, depending on what you want to say human is, right? You're going beyond the Homo sapien. And your mind, because I'm going to still say, at the end of the day, race is a social construct, so it's really more lifestyle. But if I just pretend to be like, yeah, it's really real, right? Then you're like, then you say, this just depends how you look. Okay, because you're not going to, because at the end of the day, you're not going to even get a universal agreement of that shit. That's why I know it's not real, because you're not going to be like, is it DNA? Well, Aborigines don't have black DNA, but they look black. If they look black? Same thing, Aborigine. You ever notice when an Aborigine kid from Australia, they have a kid with a white person, that kid looks way more white than if an African or African American has a kid with a white person, right? Sometimes you get two black people who produce albino. Are they not black? That's not counting people mixed. Then they say, well, if you have 1% black, you black. So there's not going to be any universal agreement, to be honest. And I think that is the problem for most people, right? The problem for most people is they're claiming divinity and they don't know how divine that truly is. I always give this example. You can talk all day about UFOs. You can talk all day about aliens, right? A person can talk all day about that shit. You could have joint sessions in Congress talking about UPAs. What do they call the UFOs now? UAPs, some shit like that? UAPs real, right? You could have all that. The public could think they want to know. You start uniting, I'm not even saying global, just like people start seeing how black looking people live everywhere, not just the obvious, Compton, Detroit, Johannesburg, Bahia, Brazil. We know about that, even though some people don't even know about Bahia and Johannesburg, right? But let's say we know that. Kingston, we know that, right? Okay, we get it, right? Oakland, we get it. When you start adding black-looking people, and it starts to say, "Oh shit, see the Pacific Islands, see Polynesia, Melanesia, way more numbers, right? You see a lot of the Middle Eastern countries from Kuwait. Let's just say the big ones, Oman and Yemen, right? They got a lot of Afro-Arabs in them places. And then to a lesser extent, you start going to Kuwait. Jordan and them have a little bit, Lebanon have a little bit, but Kuwait has a good amount, right? Kuwait, Saudi Arabia has a good amount. Iraq has a good amount. Basra, I think, right? Has a good amount. Turkey's getting a good amount, right? Then you start saying, okay, and that's not including North Africa. That's not including Sudan, right? Then you start saying, damn, and then that's just the Middle East. And you go Latin America, they got more numbers than North America. Just saying. Then you start looking, and then you say, oh shit, India, even places in India, it might have 100 million. Depending if you're looking at black-looking people, maybe 200 million people. And I'm saying 200 million, I'm not counting the ones with straight hair. You count the blue ones with dark skin straight hair, you might get 300 million people. And people start saying, shit. And then you get the random Negritos in the Philippines and all these places, and you bring just two of each together, right? Two of each together, right? And you start going to, then you have a joint conference. And the two of each together, let them be priests or priestesses of their indigenous systems. Don't just bring them together. You bring together priestesses or priests of those indigenous systems. You start to see how much fear motherfuckers get quick. That's why then they have to make all these different identities and all these different ways of identifying themselves, because you want them motherfuckers split up, right? You bring those different energies together. Like remember, when Haiti had a revolution, there's 21 tribes. You don't look at it now, but there's 21 tribes come together. If you did that shit worldwide, and it's like 4,000, and put the energies together, that will scare you way more than some gray in a craft. That's just real talk. Would it happen? Of course it's not gonna happen because again, let's go back to maturity. When you're not mature, you don't look at it and say, we're so big, even within Africa itself. I know people don't like DNA, right? So that's why so many people think DNA tests are fake, right? But just based on genetics, the East and West Africa is more genetically diverse between them than Europe and Asia. So you put all black people together, there's more genetic diversity between them. What does that mean? We all have different lifestyles. Right? Completely different ways of looking at the world. East Africa and West Africa is way different from each other. Right? You black from the Arab slave trade, which is more East Africa, right? So those territories, Iraq, I know Turks and Arabs, but bear with me, let's pretend they are. Turkey, Iran, I know Iranians and Persians and Arabs, but pretend they are. Persians, Jordanians, right? You start the Oman and Yemen, the big ones, right? Oman, Yemen, North Africa, the big ones, right? You put them together, they have a different lifestyle. If I go Latin America, I go Colombia, Venezuela, Brazil, Peru. If I go up North America, we go due to the homies, right? How people see shit in Compton, DC, Southside Chicago, Harlem, all different, vastly different. And you can say, well, you're supposed to do it like this. I mean, that's your opinion, but it's vastly different. So everybody's gonna have their own way of doing certain shit. Everyone's gonna even perceive what's black their own way, right? For some people, just identification. For some people, it's how you eat, how you cook. All that shit got under the Africans had certain ways of cooking when they came even to the new territories. Certain ways of stewing food. Certain ways of mixing root vegetables. Which is different. Certain ways of making spice. Certain herbs for medicine. All that goes into play. Right? For some people, the drum is part of spirituality. For some people, just music. So when you have more flavor amongst yourself than everybody else put together, if we go by flavor of genetic diversity, right? Let's be honest, different type of spiritual systems. Only a place like India is going to rival it. And they're kind of black adjacent, whether they want to accept it or not. India is the only place I know who could have Sikhism, there's version of Shivaism, Shaktiism. It gets different types of yoga because there's different types of paths to unify with the divine, right? I mean, there's shit, even to this day, black-looking people in Malaysia, Pakistan. And I don't say black-looking people, I'm talking nappy hair, curly, kinky hair, whatever you want to call it. So if you look at it based on that, they're everywhere. That's not even including immigration. Right? Everywhere. And not just everywhere. When it comes to the blacks in America, their culture is at the forefront of the world. Entertainment-wise, culturally, what moves things. You get the American blacks to accept something, the whole world would accept it. How could that not be God? Now, is it God where, again, like I said, maturity, right? There's a maturity that comes in, right? Sometimes, eventually, things move beyond entertainment. Sometimes things move beyond what happened to you. If you say you God the planet means God the planet. I have an opinion about Armenia and Turkey going to war. I can't just be like, that's not our business. Now, you might say it's not our business in terms of, I got my own shit to worry about, so until I get my own shit to worry about, I can't worry about you in terms of making moves for you. Like, I have an opinion, I'm God. It don't matter if it's Pacific Ocean, Arctic Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, I'm God, right? That's where it is a problem. You see? Because when you're that, if you make many musics, if many musics come from you, you make so much music, right? That you make 15 genres, and the children, which is everyone else, get 6 or 7, and you got 8 for yourself, and the children have 7, right? That they got from you and they flipped to something else. Let them have those 7. You got 8. Anytime you got to make a move, you flip it back, and you go in those genres and dominate if you have to. That's not deep, but it's mature. The immature thing is to complain all day about you not getting recognition. Like when you create, that's the drawback of creating. When you're as creative, listen, blacks in America got their whole everything stripped away from them. And they created genres from scratch. Didn't you? You see what I'm saying? Part of doing that is you create so much, you create some new shit, and you forget your old shit. If you get your old shit, you should be happy somebody else did it. Now, is all people gonna downplay your contributions? Of course, but they can only downplay your contributions if you don't know your contributions. It's one thing to say you created country, but when you stop knowing country music and you don't know it anymore, so anybody could downplay the shit, right? So then I get the naysayers. Naysayers will say, whoa, and I'm gonna end it quickly, and I'm gonna take it to the Patreon section, right? You guys want free shit? Well, then that's when you're not gonna get certain information. And if you think motherfuckers got information, follow the people who tell you you a god because you have melanin. Follow them dudes. You a god because Egypt was you built the pyramids. Follow them dudes. Cool. When it comes to the spiritual shit, when it comes to the real reason why you're feared, them dudes can't ever tell you the truth because the truth is not for clickbait. Them dudes only care about clickbait. So enjoy your free information. But I would say spiritually, well, you're the oldest. Your lunar systems are the oldest. You have spiritual concepts that other people who left have to recreate, right? So it would be like saying, as powerful as blacks in America had everything stripped and they recreated, they made music and certain stuff so dope that it outshined even other territories of blacks where the African culture survived more, right? But then imagine if you're that creative and then you put together the stuff that the ancestors already put, you put it together, and you don't start from scratch, but you build. You see? Then that becomes something different. And that becomes something powerful. And that becomes something that a lot of outsiders will never understand because there's going to be concepts that they don't, like if you say, even if you said the human race is 300,000 years old and everybody else all non-other looking people those 300,000 years, I don't know, came in 20,000 years ago, maybe, that's like less than 10%. So historically, but most importantly, concept that's wrapped in spirituality, they're not going to know or they'll have to reinvent. Some they will never discover because in the end, I'll just leave it at this. You got people who would make up systems like a Necromonicon or Chaos Magic, these systems that sometimes call primordial forces that's beyond the traditional Abrahamic systems or even the occult systems related to Abrahamic systems like Hermeticism and Kabbalah and all this other type of stuff, right? And they'll come with the black capes and brag about we calling on these forces. Cool, bro, cool. In African systems, that's intertwined with the systems. They don't gotta, so that's why sometimes people don't even know they've been doing the same thing that some of these other guys, these newcomers been doing who making new systems up. But for the African systems or the black systems, there's more safeguards that the other groups don't have. So the other groups don't have those safeguards. They have to go the long way and they gotta do Kabbalah and all this other type of stuff. Do that first, clean themselves up, then do that dark shit. Now, most of them don't have the patience, so they do the dark shit before they're ready, and it blows up in their face. And then spiritual concepts or intelligences or spirits that are not technically evil, they're classified as evil because when people look at them, they say, oh, shoot, look what it does to your life. You see? But that's it for the free content. So we're going to continue in the Patreon section. So if a person wants to hear that, yeah, you got to sign up for the Patreon section. If you don't, well, enjoy the dudes tell you God because you got some melanin. Good luck with that. Cyrus King. Till next time. Peace.